we already mentioned, the reason that we need this layer is because we want to provide a reliable end-to-end delivery. So we build on the network layer to provide data transport from process on sending machine to process on receiving machine with reliability. So this layer allows us to implement reliable sequenced delivery. Efficient, reliable, and cost effective. So this layer allows us to implement connections and the idea here is that the transport layer code runs on the client machines. In other words, we have a bunch of routers and links which are part of the network service provider's equipment, and we have, as the users, no control over these things and what happens to them. But the transport layer is the first layer that is on our machine. The software that controls this layer is on our machine, so we can implement some connections and other, we could write our own code to handle any network issues that we're not happy with. So for example, if the network layer is losing packets, we can implement our own connections and track these bits and pieces and acknowledge them and make sure that they are received. The way that we would implement these connections is by using something called a socket. So the socket will have three things. It will have the IP address of the machine that we are trying to connect to, which allows us to uniquely identify a machine. But then on the machine itself, which process do we give this data packet to? So every machine has a bunch of programs or processes running on it. So which one do we give this data to? So we need the process ID, so that's part of the socket. And there is one more thing that we need, and we just call the port. The port is like a little doorway that allows us to get inside a particular machine. So we could go through that port and connect to that machine. So to establish the connection, we need to use a port number, and that is part of the socket. So what happens is that the receiving machine is sitting there and it's listening for new connections to come. Before it can listen, the process or service or server, which is we're trying to connect to, is binding itself to a particular port number and it's listening on that port number. When a new connection request comes in, it can accept the connection and then establish the connection. Once the connection is established, we can send and receive data on that connection. When we're finished with the connection, we need to close the connection to release resources. So let's see how this connection is established. So the sending machine, this is the sending machine, this is the receiving machine, or this host wants to connect. Let's say this is the client, and it wants to connect, let's say this is a web browser, and it wants to connect to the server or the web server. So what happens is it sends a connection request CR to the server. When the server sees the connection request, it contains inside of it a sequence number. So the browser sent the connection request and picked up some random number, let's say X, and said, this is going to be my sequence number with which I am going to track every segment that I'm sending to you. So I will start with X. And the next thing I'm going to send you will be X plus 1. And the next thing will be X plus 2 and X plus 3. So every piece of data or segment that is being sent is tracked now, and it has a sequence number. So this guy receiving side, the server, sees that and says, fine, I acknowledge that your sequence will start at number X. And my sequence will start at number Y, and send back an acknowledgement. You see, that's very different from what's happening in the network layer. There was no acknowledgements there. We just sent the packet, boom, on the wire, and it's gone. There is no sequencing, there is no acknowledgements, there's nothing like that. But now we want to implement a reliable connection. So we are tracking things and acknowledging things. So the server says, okay, I acknowledge this, my sequence will be equal to Y. Once this is done, now the sender or the browser can start sending data. And in the first data segment that it sends, it acknowledges the server's sequence number. So it says, you will be tracking this segment starting at number Y, and I acknowledge that. So the next thing I expect from you will be Y plus 1.